What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and if you've been keeping up with my channel over the last year and a half or so, you know that I am not a fan of the franchise The X-Files. I didn't like the TV series, I didn't really like the movies, and I didn't like the revival that came out earlier this year. I was really not a fan of The X-Files. There's very little about that series that really works, in my opinion. I've always been confused and perplexed at why people even enjoy this show. And so today, I wanted to do a video where I ask the question, what would happen if I rebooted The X-Files? And there's actually not as much about this series that I would change as you might think. The few things that I would change would be pretty big, but it's not like I have a list of 50 items that I would change about The X-Files. Basically, I would just change a few things about some of your regular characters in the show and kind of give them more of a clear and concise arc that they would go through from beginning to end, and then I would make the premise of the series a little bit less confusing and a little bit more clear so that you can have an idea of where the series is going from beginning to end. So starting with your characters, I think that the X-Files that we got actually started off in a really good and interesting place. You've got two FBI agents, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully. They are working on the X-Files, which are dead-end cases that nobody in the FBI really cares about, and all of these cases involve paranormal, supernatural, and just weird things about them, and that's kind of why they are dead-end cases, because nobody else believes in the paranormal or the supernatural or the weird except for Fox Mulder. He is the only person in this entire organization that does believe in all of that stuff, so he is very excited and very interested in the X-Files. Dana Scully is assigned by one of her superiors to work with Mulder, and wink wink nod nod, she is supposed to debunk everything that he believes in, and she is basically sent to spy on Mulder. But very early on, Scully already makes the decision that she is not going to spy on Mulder, even if she doesn't believe in any of this stuff that Mulder does believe in. She still respects him as an agent, and she comes to see him as a friend, and so she's not going to spy on him for the FBI. And so, right off the bat, this is a very interesting premise. The problem is that the series refused to move away from this premise, because when you have Scully, who starts the series off as the skeptic, you can't keep her in that role, because when she sees ghosts and goblins and actual evidence that aliens exist throughout the series, but then she continues to be a skeptic, that is a problem, because it makes Scully seem like a big, huge idiot. She was the skeptic of the series for 7 years, and then once Mulder was abducted, suddenly she became the believer. One of the big things that I would change about this series is that Scully starts off as a skeptic, but by the end of season 1 at the latest, she says, okay, I've seen aliens, I've seen ghosts, and I've seen magic and stuff like that. From now on, I do believe in all this stuff. I'm no longer the skeptic. And then you will have to say, okay, since their source of tension in season 1 was, do these things exist? Mulder says they do, Scully says they don't. Starting from that point forward, after Scully becomes more of a believer, their source of tension changes a little bit. Now that Scully knows that all of this stuff exists, and she knows that her superiors are trying to cover it up for some reason, now their source of tension is, how do we go about exposing this to the rest of the world? We need to do it in such a way where we're not going to be killed and disappeared by our superiors, because they very clearly have a reason that they're trying to keep all of this hidden, and they don't want the rest of the world to know about it. And we need to expose this, but we need to figure out how to do it. And so, starting with season 2, I would have Mulder, he's basically going to be your shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy, and Scully is going to be over here giving him a smack upside the head saying, Mulder, stop and think for a minute. I know that aliens exist, but we have to formulate an actual plan. So that is kind of the initial arc that I would start Scully on, where she starts off as a skeptic, but she does not stay in that character mold throughout the entire series. I think that was a huge, huge slap in this series' face. It really made this entire series not work, that Scully continued to not believe in any of this stuff when she would actually see it with her own eyes. There's one episode in either season 2 or season 3 where she actually sees aliens running past her, and then she continues to be a skeptic after that. That was a huge problem with this series, and I would change that immediately, just right off the bat. She starts off as your skeptic, but then she does grow and change as a person as the series progresses. I wouldn't change as much about Mulder. I like the idea that his sister was abducted when he was a young boy, just before he became a teenager, and he is basically, everything that he's done in his life since she was abducted has been in effort to try and find his younger sister. He joins the FBI basically so that he can get closer to finding the answers. If he can find out why are all of these people being abducted all over the planet, then maybe he can find out if his sister is alive, and if she is, where is she? I like all of that, and I like the idea that he is a really good agent. It's just that nobody really takes him seriously because he believes in all of this weird stuff that they don't believe in. I like all of that. One of the few things that I would change about Mulder is that in the series, we would every now and then see him contact one of his allies. It was usually someone very high up in the government who would act as his contact and confidant, and then most of the time they weren't even trustworthy. They were doing secret shady stuff on the side that Mulder didn't know about. Then you also had the lone gunman, and then there was a few times in the series where we would see him get on public TV and he would be debating with somebody else over the existence of aliens or stuff like that. Or there were these people who would pass around newsletters and he was a subscriber to these newsletters, stuff like that. I would actually change that a little bit so that Mulder is not a free agent who happens to meet with these people anytime he needs something. I would say that while Mulder is an agent of the FBI, he is also a member of the secret underground bunker of sorts of people who all believe in aliens and stuff like that, and they're trying to find a way to blow open this whole conspiracy theory about the government covering all this stuff up. They basically have an underground network that is planet-wide, and Mulder is actually an agent of this network. If you've ever seen the miniseries V or V the Final Battle, where we get to see this network against these alien visitors who have come to Earth, and they claim that they're friendly, but then we find out, no, they're not friendly, and then this network slowly builds itself up over the course of the first miniseries, and then we get to see this network doing stuff against the alien visitors in the second miniseries. I would want Mulder's non-FBI agency that he works with to be something kind of like that. We wouldn't see them in every episode, but anytime there's something where Mulder's like, okay, I've got to go off the grid, I've got to go stop this thing, and I can't do it as an agent of the FBI, so I'm going to do it as an agent of this anti-conspiracy theory organization that exists all over the planet. That's something that I would try to change about Mulder, so that he's not just a guy who's working in the FBI, basically working alone, and he has a few allies. I would change it so that he has more allies, and it's larger than just Mulder. Mulder is not the only person who believes. There's other people out there who believe also. They're just not embedded in the FBI like Mulder is. And also, since Mulder is embedded in the FBI, he would be a very important agent for these guys because he can get close to the answers, closer than any of these other people can, and he can also figure stuff out that's going on within the FBI, or at least allegedly he can. Probably he wouldn't be able to figure out as much stuff as these people might think that he could, because the government knows that Mulder knows about aliens and stuff like that, and so they're trying to keep him at a distance so that he doesn't find out about all this stuff. Then you've got the aliens and the conspiracy itself. I would actually make this a lot more clear so that the series kind of has an idea of what direction it's going in. A big problem that I had with the series as it went forward was that it never really seemed like any of these plots about the alien conspiracy actually had any momentum and were going in a clear direction. So I would say that the aliens, they want to come to Earth because their own planet is no longer habitable, and we wouldn't necessarily hear the aliens speak or anything like that because that would be a little hokey. We wouldn't even have to know exactly their motivations, like is their planet destroyed or was it just ruined over years of abusing the planet and the atmosphere and stuff like that. We wouldn't have to know their exact motivations, at least initially, but eventually we would need to find out why are the aliens doing what they're doing. So they are looking for a new planet that they can live on, and they found Earth, which is very close to what they need to live on, except that they cannot live on Earth for extended periods of time. They can go on the planet for brief, short little stints, but then they have to go back to their ship because there's something in the atmosphere that is toxic to these aliens. So they are kidnapping certain people on the planet so that they can experiment on these humans and try and figure out, okay, what is it on this planet that's killing us? Is there any way that we can turn these humans into alien-human hybrids, and then maybe we can use them as our agents on Earth, and then they can kind of figure out what's going on this planet so that we can eventually turn this into our new home world. And while they're doing all that, you've got the US government who makes a deal with these aliens. You've got certain people within the government saying, okay, we know that aliens exist, we know that you're here to try and take over the planet. Basically, we want to stay alive after you take over the planet. We don't want to be part of your slave force or whatever. Whenever you do take over the planet, you're going to enslave 98% of the human population. Everyone who is trying to cover up the existence of aliens in the government, they are basically going to be saying, okay, we want to help you do that, and then whenever you do succeed, we're going to be immune to whatever it is that you're going to do to the rest of the people. And so that explains why the aliens would even make a deal with the US government in the first place. It makes sense that the government people would want to make a deal with the aliens, but in the series, it never made any sense that the aliens would have any reason to make a deal with the humans. So this would kind of provide a reason why the aliens are working with the humans, because they can't operate on Earth for very extended periods of time, so you've got government agents working for the alien conspiracy. And that would basically be the broad premise of your series. You've got the government, and they've covered it all up, and they're trying to keep it covered, and then you've got Mulder, and eventually eventually you've got Scully, and they're working with this underground railroad trying to blow this whole thing wide open. And then you've got people like the cigarette smoking man. He believes that there's nothing that they can do to stop the aliens, so he might as well join them so that things are less bad for him whenever they do eventually win. And then you've got people like Krychek, who I really liked in the series whenever he was first introduced, but then every episode that used Krychek from that point forward, I did not like him as much, and I became less interested in him as the series went along. But I would say that Krychek is kind of like the cigarette smoking man in that he doesn't think that there's any way that they can fight back against these aliens. He thinks that no matter what happens, the aliens are eventually going to win, and they're going to take over the planet, so he might as well work with this conspiracy agency. But then, the further we get into the series, he would realize that Mulder and Scully maybe have a chance of stopping these aliens, so he's going to start feeding them information, and they're not even going to know who is giving them all of this information. But Krychek is very slowly going to become kind of a double agent where he wants Mulder and Scully to succeed, but he can't openly work with them because then he'll be killed, and then eventually his superiors would find out what he's doing and they would kill him. I would basically be combining Krychek with the character Diana Fowley, who was another character I never really liked, but I could take a few elements from her character and kind of merge them with Krychek's character and basically create a brand new character. I think that would be the best way to do it. And then the only other character that really needs to be retooled just a little bit would be Agent Skinner, who is Mulder and Scully's supervisor, and he barely shows up at all in season 1. I think he shows up in maybe one episode, but then after that he starts showing up a lot more, and he starts off as being kind of the hard guy who doesn't really like Mulder and Scully, and he's always blocking them in their attempts to investigate the paranormal. In fact, at one point early on in the series, he shuts down the X-Files, but then by the end of the series, he is Mulder's representative whenever he's put on trial. He's the one trying to get Mulder off on all these charges that are brought against him. So he definitely went through a lot of changes over the series. And so the only thing that I would actually change about Skinner is that he probably knows what Mulder and Scully are doing against the alien conspiracy, but he can't actually do anything. His hands are tied because if he tries to help them in any way, he's going to get fired or he's going to get killed. So publicly, he's always going to be like, Mulder, I don't want to hear another word about aliens. I want you to go investigate this kidnapping that has nothing supernatural in it. But then secretly, he's going to be like, good luck, guys. There might be some alien activity over there. You need to go and check it out, but you didn't hear this from me. Good luck, and I'm going to be over here trying to keep my supervisors busy so they don't find out about what you're doing over there. Basically, I would just keep Skinner more or less in the role that he was in the series, but I would have him a little bit more active in the background where he's trying to let Mulder and Scully kind of succeed in their mission, but he can't publicly be working with them, which later on in the series he was more publicly working with them, so it didn't really work as well, and it didn't make as much sense that Skinner was so publicly in favor of Mulder and Scully when his bosses would have just killed him if they found out that he was working with them. So those are the characters that I basically would change, and then that's how the series would go. The only other thing that I would change is Mulder himself. I feel like Mulder needed to die in this series. I felt like Mulder was a very tragic character. He masked his tragedy in funny jokes. He was always the witty one. He would say and do funny things. But Mulder was a character who both of his parents died, and then his sister gets kidnapped. He has a lot of really tragic stuff going on in his life. And so the big thing that I would change is whenever you think that you're going to end the series, if it's going to be season 5 or season 6 or whatever, whenever you think that you're going to end this series, I would say that Mulder needs to die fighting to protect this planet. And then Scully and him, over the course of this series, they've slowly gotten together. That's another big thing I would change is in the series wanted us to think that they were going to be getting Mulder and Scully together in a romantic way, but it never really played out in the way that it wanted you to think that it would. But I would basically have Mulder and Scully start off as they are agents who don't really like each other, but they're working together reluctantly, and then eventually they trust each other and they become really good partners, and then they become platonic friends, and then eventually Scully is going to be the one who would kind of initialize this relationship between her and Mulder, because Mulder is so focused on trying to blow open this whole alien conspiracy thing that he's not really going to notice this very attractive agent who's been working with him, who has slowly grown feelings for him. And then once she kind of shows her hand and says, hey, I kind of have a thing for you, then Mulder would realize, oh wait, I can do this whole alien conspiracy thing, and I can also have a relationship with Scully. So by the end of your series, they both are in a relationship, and it's going to be very adorable, and everyone will love it. And then you're going to break everyone's heart and kill Mulder while he is protecting the world doing something. Maybe he blows up in an alien spaceship or something like that. Mulder dies fighting the good fight, and then I would end the series with maybe a Pyrrhic victory. They've somehow driven the aliens off temporarily, but the aliens could very easily come back, and also we've lost Agent Mulder in this fight. So it's not a end of Return of the Jedi moment where everyone is celebrating. It's kind of a, yeah, we sort of won, but we've also kind of had some losses along the way, and so we're not really happy about this victory. But then if you want to bring the X-Files back with TV movies or something like that, or even a theatrical movie like they did, then you can do that with aliens eventually coming back and trying something new to try and take over the planet. And then I would have Scully basically replace Mulder as the new agent who wants to believe. She kind of replaces him in this network that Mulder was part of, this underground agency. She's working with them now. She's working with the lone gunman. She's basically doing everything that Mulder was doing when she first met him, trying to make sure that the government doesn't get away with covering all this stuff up. She's going to expose all these agents who are corrupt, and she's going to eventually expose to the world, hey, there's aliens, and the government is trying to make sure that you don't know that. Basically, I would have Scully kind of become the replacement for Mulder, if that makes any sense. So those are my thoughts on what I would do if I rebooted the X-Files. Personally, I think it would have been a much better series if they had gone in this direction, but I'm sure that a lot of people really wouldn't like some of my ideas, like killing Mulder. I'm sure people really would not have liked that. I'm not sure if people would have liked it more than introducing Agent Doggett and Agent Reyes, who were characters that I did like, but I just didn't use them in this hypothetical reboot that I'm doing here. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below, and if you like this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with another video, and then I'll be back next week with some more videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later.